Good morning, guys. Happy Monday. So today we're going to be looking at measures 57 to 65 in Winter Palace. There is a tempo change at the beginning of this section. It just says presto. It doesn't give us an exact tempo marking or metronome marking, but since we were going eighth note equals 260 before, or that was our goal tempo for the previous section, I'm just going to say our goal tempo for this section is going to be eighth note equals 280. For the demonstrations today, I'm just going to click up my metronome to 210. Without further ado, go ahead, check the description box for the timestamp for your section, and let's get into it. Alright, first violins, just a couple things to mark before we get started. First and foremost, make sure that you notice that there is a repeat sign at the end of measure 60. If you want to, you can mark in a little exaggerated bracket for yourself like I did. All of these eighth note double stops, we are going to play non-divisi here at the beginning. You'll have a B flat on the G string and an F natural on the D string, a low 2 straight across both strings, and then sometimes you'll be adding in a G flat, which is right next to that second finger on the D string. All of these double stop down bows are going to be nice and short and heavy at the frog. Measure 61 for that B natural, go ahead and use a second finger. Instead of going from a low one to a high one, you're just going to use a low one and then put your second finger, if you had a first finger tape, it would go right there on the A string. For the 16th note section, they do have dots on them, so it's going to be a little bit off the string. It's going to end up being more of like a brush stroke. Don't think about actively trying to bounce it. When it goes this fast and you put it in the right part of the bow, which is the middle, it will come off the string a little bit. In measure 63, the first E you're going to play with a fourth finger, and then the second and third E's you'll play open. In that scale down at the end of measure 63, you can do that D sharp either with a high 3 or a low 4, whichever is more comfortable for you. And the same thing in measure 65, first E with a 4 and then second 2 with an open, D sharp either with a low 4 or a high 3. I'm going to set my metronome at 210 and I'm going to play through this including the repeat at the end of measure 60. 2 and ready, go. One thing I noticed while I was playing, and I don't think I did a great job at, are there accents in measure 63 and 65 on beat 2 in both measures on the F sharp and then on the G. So just make sure that you catch those accents, give it a little more weight and speed. The other thing I noticed while I was playing was in measure 61. That basically amounts to a double down bow going from measure 60 to 61 because you were doing the offbeat down bows, and then 61 does need to start down. So you might want to mark that down bow there on those 4 down, up, and then down bow on the 16th notes in the following section. Okay, that's it. Happy practicing. I'll see you back here for the next part. Alright, second violins, there is a lot going on in this part through here, 57 to 65. Get your pencil, there's definitely some things we need to mark in. So look at the first measure. That F sharp during the first beat lasts through the entire measure, so I would put a sharp sign over that last F. Going into the next measure, measure 58, all of the F's are sharp in this measure. I would mark every single one. It's a long measure, and that first accidental lasts through the entire thing. The A on beat 3, where you have the F sharp G, A, 2/16 and an eighth note, is going to be a fourth finger. In measure 60, the A in the third beat, the first note of the third beat, is going to be a fourth finger. I would also mark in the triplet that F is also going to be sharp. There's a repeat sign at the end of measure 60. If I were you, I would circle that. In measure 62, the E that was previously flat is now natural. And we are going to play these double stops as double stops, so both inside and outside will need to be playing E natural and B natural. In measure 63, you might want to mark that the counting in this measure, 1 and 2 and a. So the rests between measure 63 and 64, there's actually 3 eighth note rests. So it's 1 and 2 and a 1. Rest ba ba and a 1. And that happens again at the end of measure 65. There's 3 eighth notes worth of rest there. The rhythms through here are not necessarily difficult, but when we get going fast enough, it's going to be difficult to make it sound the way it looks. For instance, in measure 58, you've got 2 beats of 16th notes, then you've got 2/16 and an eighth, so it would be 3 E and, And then beat 5 is a triplet, 5 and or triplet, okay? Those are going to be, it's going to be really easy for those to sound the same when they're definitely not the same. So I'm going to play this at eighth note equals 100, pretty slow, just so that we can get the counting. So this first measure, the counting would be 1 E and a 2 and triplet. Sound like this, ready, and. The next measure would be 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and, 4 and, 5 and a, triplet. So this is the second measure, measure 58, and a. Make sure beats 3 and 5 are different rhythmically. Measure 59 would be 1 E and a, 2 E and a let. 1 E and a, 2 E and a let. So. Measure 60, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, triplet. Now I'm going to play through the entire thing at eighth note equals 100. E and a, ready, go. I'm going to kick the metronome up just a little bit and play through it at eighth note equals 140. 1, 2, and ready, here we go. And finally, going to play through it at eighth note equals 210. And 2 and ready, go. Okay, there you have it. So this is a part that I would definitely practice really slowly to start, even slower than I played it the first time. I definitely had to do that. Write in your counting if you need to, count it out loud, play it on an open string until you can really get the counting down, and then slowly start incrementally getting it faster. All right, happy practicing, and I will see you back here tomorrow for the next part. Okay, violas. So your part today is blessedly not too difficult. The second violin part that I just recorded made my brain hurt really bad. So you're basically just playing down bow eighth notes on the off beats. You start off with a lot of E flats. Just a couple of things to mark in and watch out for. In measure 61, you've got an E flat on the C string, so you use a low 2, and it's directly followed by a B natural on the G string. Don't try to move your second finger up from low 2 to high 2. Just use your third finger right next to it. So right down here for the E flat, and then third finger half step away for the B natural. In measure 62, you've got an E natural on the and of 2, where it had previously been flat for multiple measures. I would mark that in there to make sure you don't accidentally play an E flat. Then you've got a G sharp, open D. In the next measure, you've got a D and then a D sharp. I would just play open D and then low 1. Measure after that is the same as 62, so open G, E natural, you might want to mark that, and then G sharp, D, and then another D, D sharp. As long as you can keep track of which beat you're on and not get lost, I don't think this part is going to give you too much trouble. I'm going to set my metronome at eighth note equals 210 and play through it. 2 and ready, go in. Okay, cello bass. So this section starts out with the same kind of eighth note jumping that you were doing back at measure 41, but now it's in octaves. So basses, let's talk about what you're going to do. Starting at 57 and going all the way through 60, you're just going to play the E flat on the D string. So just play that same note both times instead of trying to do an octave. Cellos during that section, I would assume it would be easier to do it in first position and hop the string, but if I'm wrong and it's easier to play the octave, go for it. But my recommendation is going to be hop the string, because in measure 61 you have to be back into first position. Again, if you can figure out a different fingering that's better, absolutely go for it. Going back to the basses, in measure 61, the first note, the E flat, you're going to play on the D string just like you have been, and then the B you can do on the A string in half position. Then starting in measure 62, play these last four measures all up the octave. So 62, 63, 64, and 65, just 8 VA that whole part. Other things I want to mention for everybody, there is a repeat sign at the end of measure 60, so you might want to put like an exaggerated bracket there to remind yourself of that repeat sign. At measure 62, the first note is an E natural. I would definitely mark that because you've been playing E flat for so many measures prior to that. In measure 58, you've kind of got a disjointed rhythm there. You've got 1 and 2 and so you're resting for 2 eighth notes at the end of that. It tripped me up, so I figure I'd mention it. You might want to put 2 tick marks or write in the counting for that measure. And then in 64, again, you've got an E natural to start out that measure. Okay, other than that, it's not too bad. I'm going to set my metronome at 210 and play through this. 2 and ready, go. And one thing I didn't mention, and maybe didn't do such a great job at, is there are accents on the eighth notes in measure 65 and 63, so make sure you give those a little extra weight and speed. Okay, that's it. I will see you back here for the next part tomorrow.